Welcome to Teams Transformed, the podcast for people who want to see real team transformation.
For courageous coaches, curious leaders, and anyone passionate about unlocking the true power of teams.
We're your hosts, Georgina
and Allard,
here to journey with you through transformational insights on how to coach teams with presence, depth, and emergence.
Let's explore not just the tools, but the art of transforming teams. Hi there, everyone. In this episode, we are joined by Jason Leunberger, who began his career in tech working for a VC-backed startup, then held consultant roles for multiple firms, including Ernst & Young, working with bootstrapped founders to Fortune 10 leaders and teams. After leading governance, risk and compliance globally for Starbucks, where he was recognized for his coaching and leadership development, he founded Kinkou to focus on coaching leaders and teams, a work that he loves more than anything else. And in this episode, he shares with us a story that happened not too long ago, a piece of work with a rather large team, clearly divided into the old guard and the new guard. So lots of learnings here about subgroups and courageous experimenting with different levels of the system, and the time that it takes really for a team to come together as, one voice, one team. And we also touch upon the value of co-coaching along the way. So anyway, an absolutely wonderful story to listen to. Hope you enjoy it as much as we did. We've called it "This Might Not Go Well" in reference to those very specific moments in team coaching and that we've all felt, I'm absolutely sure. This might not go well, but it went very well. So here you go, Jason.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Georgina and Al. It's so good to see you and hear you. I've missed you.
Miss you too. Where are you still? Are you still in New York, Jason? Or?
I'm very far away from New York. I'm in Seattle.
Oh, in Seattle. Why was I thinking you were in New York?
I don't know. But yeah, it's Seattle.
Same country, different coast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, different coast.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for joining us today in this Moments of Emergence series of podcasts, Jason, and look forward to getting to the conversation. Before we start, what do you want the listeners to know about you?
Well, I think maybe something to know about me is that I love learning, and I love learning through this whole team coaching experience. And I definitely am learning as I go, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It's a never-ending learning experience, isn't it? And I think team coaching at its best teaches us as much about ourselves as about the art of team coaching. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it really resonates with me too. The never-ending desire to learn more and to understand more and to make sense of what's happening and reflect on what's happened and maybe that's part of what this podcast is about too. On reflecting on what has happened and why it happened the way it happened and learning from how we showed up in the moment. And yeah, so maybe we could dive just in, straight in. This series of podcasts, as Georgina mentioned, is about moments of emergence. So it's as you well know, we love to work emergently. We love to work with the warm data, as Nora Bateson would call it, that's apparent in the relationships between people in a team, and more often than not, when we do that, we discover new things. We're open to the unexpected, and we're not defining the team as a frozen kind of entity that we define as the team, and therefore we kind of have a handle on it. But we stay open to the fluctuating relationships that exist in the moment. And so we were wondering with Georgina, as we were talking about this podcast just before we hit the record button, if there is such a moment, Jason, that stands out for you where you go, gosh, I remember when this or that happened, and maybe I wasn't really prepared for it. Maybe I was. But this happened, and it seemed like a rich enough moment to unpack with the team and make sense of.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of context and background into the moment. So the context and background is I was working with the team, and I had a great co-coach with me, and the team was rather large. It was like what they would consider it an extended leadership team. So it was made up of a core leadership team and then an extended leadership team. So we were coaching both teams. So one is the core and then one all together. So when we got together as an extended team, it was pretty big.
What are we talking about? 16 people or
16 people, 16, 17 people in a room, very large conference rooms. It's tough to find large conference rooms that fit that many people. And so it's a very large team, very diverse, at an organization that has been around for a very, very long time, and they're very large. And about 6 weeks into a 6-month engagement, there was a massive reorg. And so when you said that, working with a team not as a locked structure, like it was very, very real to us after 6 to 8 weeks of being with this team, to where the makeup of the team had completely changed. So people who were peers the day before were now reporting to people that were previously peers. So relationships were being challenged. The team makeup had completely changed. There were some members that were no longer with the company and had been there for a very, very long time. So the energy just changed in a matter of a week within the first third of this time that we had together, this engagement. So leading up to this moment, we dealt with all of that. We sat with that. We worked with that together, my co-coach and I. But the moment of emergence didn't happen until probably 5.5 months in to a 6-month bit of work together, the 6-month engagement together. So the moment of emergence happened far ways into the work that we were doing. And the way that we had built this work is that we wanted to have what we were calling a team development day in the beginning and a team development day at the end of our team coaching work. And it was a time for us all to come together, to be in person, and we focused on a light agenda. And we had in mind something that I've heard Al refer to many times, a minimum viable structure. Which I love. I love that. So we had a light agenda, team development day. This is towards the end, so about 5.5 months in. And we're working through half the day. So I'm in person, and for a number of reasons, my co-coach couldn't be there in person. So she was on Teams. So she was with just one other person remotely, and then the rest of us were all physically in person. So that was challenging in and of itself, just my co-coach not being there with me, and somatically I couldn't see or like even visually with our eyeballs check in with each other just to kind of sense what's going on. But what had happened in the room that day was, and we were getting a sense of this over the course of months, is that, and maybe this is similar to many other large organizations that are established and have been around for a very long time. But there was this sense of what I would consider an old guard and a new guard. So we had these the strong members of what I would consider the old guard, not to say that their contribution wasn't valuable. They had just been there for a very long time, so they understood the culture, the systems at play, how things got done, the way people made decisions, how money was spent, all that sort of thing. And then we had this new guard that had this very different energy, and they challenged the old guard. And then what we ran into pretty often was this wave of resistance, like this energy that would not allow anything to happen once they got going, because they would both generate their own resistance, and then what we got to was this wall, and we would get stuck. And so in the moment of emergence, when we were working through a specific situation a challenge that the team was experiencing, what emerged in the moment was what felt like two mayors of each town represented themselves. And they didn't call themselves out as like, I represent the old guard and I represent the new guard. It became very apparent after all of these months that there was one voice that was representing those leaders that had been at the company for a long time, and one voice that was representing the new leaders.
Yeah, sounds like it's got quite tribal.
Yes.
In the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what happened in the moment was this emerged, and both of them started essentially representing their side of the challenge. And it was very specific to them because it was the tension that they were dealing with specifically, but you could almost feel the rest of their tribe standing behind them, supporting them. So in that moment, because it felt like almost a one-on-one with spectators in a room of 15 or 16 people.
Yeah.
I had asked in that moment, would everybody be okay if we experimented with something for just a few minutes? So I intervened because it was getting a little focused and exclusive. So I felt in the moment like, okay, if this is feeling exclusive, how about we just make it exclusive? And then maybe we can learn from it being an exclusive conversation, and we can all learn from it. So I asked the two of them, and this is something that my co-coach and I had even talked about through debriefs. So like, what if this happens? Like, what are we going to do if it gets heated and there's tension? Like, what should we do? So we hadn't necessarily rehearsed this, but it's something that had crossed our minds. So like, what if this happens? So I asked them if they'd like to experiment in the moment, and they said yes. I said, how about we just listen to the two of you work through this challenge, and we'll sit back. We won't intervene. We won't ask questions. We want to hear from you and have you work out this challenge just one-on-one. And maybe I'll step in from time to time to just ask some clarifying questions if I'm noticing something that maybe feels stuck or maybe feels a little more tense or tight. Would that be okay? And they said yes. And then what was interesting is the room is everyone at the table, for whatever reason, just moved their chairs away from the table, and they literally became an audience looking in on these two people working together. And we worked through a challenge for about 30 minutes. And they worked through this tension, this specific challenge together. And there were definitely some moments where they got a little tense.
Yeah.
And a little more tight. And the challenge for me was to just like let that happen, let tension happen. Don't intervene when I felt that there was some tension, because they could work through it together. I asked a few clarifying questions, but when we got to the end, it felt like they had fully worked through something that had been pent up for a long time. And we debriefed in the moment in front of everyone. So it was just the three of us. So it was the two of them, and then it was me, and then again, all the people from the teams. But it maybe shifting to what it taught me is that being brave in the moment when you sense something is happening, to one, let it happen, but then maybe try to shine a little more light on something that's happening that you're noticing as a coach, and trying to be okay with that. Be okay with calling that out, because even though it was this moment of emergence happened so late into the engagement, it was pivotal. I don't know what ripple effect that conversation had long past that moment, because we were only with them for another few weeks.
Yes.
But after that, on that day when we sat with it, when we were debriefing, even wrapping up the day together, you could sense almost like a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Like everyone took they let their breath out.
Yeah.
Like kind of been
Like
holding their
something,
breath, and then they
like something got
released.
unblocked.
Mm-hmm.
That had
Yeah.
been blocked energetically. Some tension in the system got released. Jason, I've got curiosity there about in the story. So there's 15, 16 people. It became tribal between two people. You got an experiment with those people in the spotlight with an invitation to work through this topic in front of them. And then after you had a debrief, did you at any point include the people who'd been observing in that experience? Because I could imagine for half an hour they're on the outside, or for more than half an hour.
Yeah, we had asked at the end what did anyone else notice as they were working through this together, and we had a few people chime in with they definitely lent their leadership styles and got very prescriptive as to what they felt the one person should have done versus the other person, who was right, who was wrong. So in that debrief, it got a little messy.
I see.
Because people were leaning in and kind of sharing like their hard opinions as to what they saw. But then there were some comments that felt a little more personally impactful.
Yeah.
They shared what they noticed or what was happening for them, or thinking about a challenge that they need to work through with someone else. And maybe this was a little insightful to them, and just watching them take the time to work through this, because things are happening. One of the things that was happening with this team, that happens to so many teams, is they're working so quickly and they're pushed to work even faster. And many of their conversations are so transactional, and the conversation is mainly focused on speed. How quickly can we resolve this? And taking the time to do this was something that they had not done very often, to just let 30 minutes go by and like, what could we do together? But yeah, so to answer your question, there was a bit of debrief. There was probably more debrief when we had dispersed. And so like small hallway conversations after that.
No, it's interesting that this happened like relatively late in the 6-month engagement that this had. It goes to show that sometimes the things that really need to be said need a very, very strong container for it to finally be okay to be said. And that and the reason I say that is because, you know, many teams that you work with, there'll be this underlying kind of desire to get to one voice, one team, you know, or something to that effect. And especially in the kinds of teams that you described, Jason, you know, that work really hard and that want to move towards resolution as quickly as possible. There's often a real pressure on both the team and whoever it is that's working with the team to get to that stage of one voice, one team, which may lead to completely, you know, situations of a very superficial or artificial kind of harmony. And so it really pays, I think, in a lot of these assignments to not rush towards one voice, one team, but to understand what makes reaching one voice, one team so difficult. And when I hear you speak, it was really whoa, you know, 5.5 months down the line. No, but let's really now finally take the time to understand what makes reaching one voice, one team so hard for us. And you get that subgroup kind of dynamic. You called it the two mayors, or, you know, the two towns that stood face to face, and that subgroup work must have generated so much awareness, so much insight for the rest of the team. So what a wonderful example of working with that one level of the system.
Yeah,
the two mayors.
Yeah. And Jason, one of the things that strikes me in your story is this wasn't on your agenda. It's not like you're saying, you know, at 2 p.m. we're going to take 2 people and spotlight them and get them to work through an issue. You grabbed a moment, made space for it because the energy was there, and this was the dynamic playing out in the room. And that's what we mean by moments of emergence, is taking the opportunity. It's not always that the whole team program is without any structure. I mean, it might be, but there's so much magic if you look at the dynamic and you track what's there. There's so much magic in the dynamics that are happening, and oftentimes the pre-planned agenda means we ignore that. You could have ignored the tribes, the two mayors, and said, "Okay, we've run out of time for that now. Now let's get on to the next pre-planned activity."
Yeah, so true. We actually disregarded. We skipped past the rest of the agenda for the afternoon.
Yeah, there's such a danger, right, Georgina? Like you're saying, in those agendas, and in a lot of that discovery work that we like to do up front, or that the team likes us to do up front, because when we do that, we think we understand the team, as if the team were, like at a conceptual level. When we talk about the team, somehow we've frozen it. We've turned it into an entity that is, oh, I understand the team now. But the dynamics that you described too, Georgina, mean that the team is very fluid. And so when we come up with, like everything in life is fluid, right? But when we come up with these agendas, or when we do too much, maybe pre-work, we attempt to freeze frame the fluid, and we miss out on what's really happening in the moment. So yeah, well done, Jason.
Yes,
and co-coach.
And co-coach. I mean, that's a very complex environment with you in the room, and with your co-coach joining virtually, and when you couldn't read the somatics or any of your co-coach. Could you speak a little bit about that, about how that played out in that moment? How did you contract for what direction you're going to take, or signal to each other? Do you remember?
Well, maybe I blacked out in the moment. I don't remember the specifics, but I do remember my co-coach. She was on Teams, and she starts direct messaging me immediately, and I only caught glimpses of it. But she was being very encouraging.
Yeah.
So when I did glance at the chat, it was like, okay, she's with me. Like, we're in on this together.
Yeah.
So I feel like I can just go, because she's ready to. She's been watching this entire time.
Yeah.
And listening. So she will help. I mean, we were together. She will help if we get stuck. So I felt fully supported by her in the moment, because it felt a little scary.
Yeah.
It felt a little scary. There were some very strong personalities in the room. There was also, in the moment, I remember thinking, like, this might not go well. And one of these strong personalities might feel intimidated. They might feel like this is off the rails and not the direction that they want to take this. And they might grab the reins from me and just kind of intervene on our intervention.
Yes.
So I was a bit nervous about that too, because there were some strong voices in the room that had opinions about the way things should and shouldn't be done.
I can so identify with this notion of this might not go well.
Yeah.
I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to go there. And I think that's a real sign of our growth, as interveners. Like, this might not go well, but let's try it anyway. Because even if it doesn't go well, whatever well means, even if it doesn't go well, then there'll be something to be learned from it.
And is there anything that you remember, Jason, about how you managed your inner state to support you in going for the moment?
What did I do to support my inner state? I tried to remain calm.
Yeah.
I recognized that my energy was probably through the roof.
Okay.
I was charged, ready to go. So in moments like that, just with the practice of team coaching and working on yourself, I'd been practicing a bit to just when I felt an energy spike, like, ooh, here it is. Let's jump in and do what we think needs to be done, or do what I think needs to be done in the moment, or to raise the awareness of the team in the moment. My energy went up. So that was a signal to me to like, time to get really calm, put your feet on the ground, make sure I think we were all at that point, it almost felt like we were in a circle, in chairs. So there was no table separating us. It was literally the three of us almost in like a small circle. So we were in pretty close proximity to each other. And I remember trying to get calm, and it doesn't mean that there weren't like nerves and like a lingering sense of like, anxiety about it. But I just tried to remain calm and let it go and stay in the moment. Maybe I said to myself, like, stay here, be here. Because I tend to say that in my head at times when things are tense.
Stay here, be here.
Stay here, be here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I'm still sitting a little bit with, and then that'll be my last kind of thing I want to throw in here. But I'm still struck by the fact that it took 5.5 months, out of 6 months for this to surface. And things happen when they have to happen, right? I'm absolutely convinced about that. And we knew from the beginning. You knew from the beginning that this was an old guard, new guard kind of setup, right? And then part of me is always wondering, well, is there something that we could have done, to make that this particular kind of epiphany, to make it happen earlier on? And I really don't have the answer to that. But if you were to work it with a similar team again, or a similar kind of setup, would something you would do differently, or?
Oh my gosh, I don't think we have enough time to talk about all of that.
We're going to invite you back. Yeah.
Oh, you're so right. I mean, just my co-coach and I had talked so often. Can I just say for a second, having a co-coach is such a beautiful thing.
Oh yeah.
And I'm so happy that the two of you introduced that to her and I.
Yeah.
Because that was so useful to be able to debrief and talk through what we were both experiencing, and being able to listen in different modes and things like that. Yeah. That was just
by
awesome.
the way, if she listens to this, we send big warm hug to her.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sending a big warm hug to her too. She's probably warm because she lives in a warm place, and I'm cold. It's cold here, but anyway, yeah, big hug to her. It was so nice to be able to debrief. But when we debriefed often, and to your point, Al, there were so many moments where we looked at each other and we're debriefing afterwards and just saying, like, this is so hard. This is so hard. And they are being so resistant to everything, to each other, to us, to the world. Like, no one wants to change at all. And the leader is not making it any easier.
Yeah.
The top leader was making it much more difficult. So maybe if I just add one thing that we would do differently, is we would have a very intentional and slow one-on-one with the leader before we started this work. And maybe it was a bit too rushed, and really front load what this work could be like. Not to say that it will be like this, but this is what it could be like. And this is what we really, really need from you.
Yeah.
For what could be possible. Because I think an intentional conversation with this leader might have changed things a bit, but then again, maybe it wouldn't have. We just don't know. But if we were to go back and do it again, we would have like a very intentional, close conversation with this team leader, just almost one-on-one.
I'm a big fan of conversations with, and also coaching a team leader alongside the team coaching I do. And I often find myself saying, what this work's going to need of you, leader, is to be the change that's needed in the team. You ultimately have more power and influence than anyone else in the room. And when you be the change, it creates the conditions for others to change. And that they might nod to that, but it takes time to work that through in coaching, because they've got perhaps some fears or resistance to change that is deeply embedded in what it means to be a leader, deeply embedded in the past. We never know what those barriers might be. So there's often some human developmental work for leaders to do, to be able to let go of the positions that they've adopted, to make more space for something possible. So I'm with you on that. I think that's a great insight. Yeah.
You're bringing up some things that we had heard from this leader often, which was, my title precedes me.
Yeah.
And they would say that out loud. And they would say that in front of the team. My title precedes me. I walk into the room, my title precedes me. And that work of the leader being so important for them to be willing to do the work, not only within the team, but on themselves. Because as you mentioned, we all carry a bag with us, and the bag is full of stuff, and we don't know what's in each other's bags unless we get really curious and get interested in knowing what someone else might be carrying.
And being a team leader is hard. It's high pressure and exposed. People feel oftentimes quite exposed, feel the pressure of all that's not quite right and not quite working, often gets pushed up to the team leader. I often feel that team leaders benefit from more support to process it all. Yeah. So it sounds like you did a great job there, with lots of learning for the team and lots of learning for you and your co-coach.
And for anyone who's listening to this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Jason. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing off, a final reflection today?
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind, and maybe just resharing this story, because I don't think I've talked about this story, is that being in the middle of this team coaching work that we do, being okay with something happening or something not happening is really important. Because in that mode of being team coach, sometimes you want something to happen so badly, and sometimes it takes so long for something to emerge, and being patient and just trusting that when the time is right, it will more than likely happen, and then be brave enough to go for it.
I noticed, Jason, you used the word being 3 times there, and I want to highlight a pen over it. That's the being a team coach, isn't it? It's being energetically available for whatever's wanting to emerge, rather than our own drive for pace or performance or results or impatience. That's really sounds easier than it is. It's an ongoing practice, the being of a team coach, and that's being with what's often uncomfortable until it's ready to change. It's a fantastic example today. Thank you so much for your time and bringing that and sharing it with everyone, Jason. I'm sure listeners will greatly appreciate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me share this.
Man, thank you for agreeing to be here and sharing your insights the way you did. It's great to reconnect with you, Jason.
Looking forward to the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Bye for now. Thanks for joining today's journey of Teams Transformed.
If this sparked a new insight or a deeper question, we invite you to sit with it, not to solve it, but to let it unfold.
For resources, community, and reflection prompts, visit teamcoachingstudio.com.
Until the next time, stay present, stay curious, and keep leaning into the art of emergence.